So when I'm starting a track, while sometimes I'll start with drums and a bass groove, I usually start out with some type of melodic idea. So it'll really be me sitting down to a blank page on Ableton, firing up some of my analog synths, or maybe a soft synth, or maybe even manipulating a cool sample that I found. But regardless of what it is, I'm trying to achieve some melodic idea or hook that I can flesh out into an entire song. I find that when I start with the drums and the bass, while it's definitely fun, I end up limiting myself because you're essentially boxing yourself into what melodic idea can fit into what you've already created as far as the drums and the bass go. So by starting out with the melodic idea first, you're completely free to do whatever you want. You can experiment and come up with something and keep trying until you find that one thing where you know, okay, this is powerful, like this can turn into an entire song. So that was the case with Ruby, where I was messing around on my Moog Minotaur and came up with this little pattern, and I'll play it actually off the Minotaur. So it started off with just that one bar loop, and then I looped it 3 times and then sort of did a turnaround on the last one, the last bar, just to bring it all together. And I can actually show you the patch on the Minotaur. So this is what it looks like. This program just sort of sends the MIDI data to the hardware, so I can control this and it will control the hardware. So that's the Minotaur patch. What we're going to do is recreate it in Sonic Academy Anna. So let's pull that up. Where are you? Okay. So we don't really need to use the Minotaur as a reference. It's not too complicated of a patch. Essentially, it's just 2 saw waves, and one of them is tuned to the 5th, so it makes a chord. So if we start with an initial patch, the first thing I'm always going to do is bring down the volume of the plugin, and that's just because you need some headroom to put processing on later down here, and you never want to clip on the channel itself because you'll just get nasty digital clipping, and it's just, there's no reason to do that. It just sounds bad. So if we were to play it just off the initial patch, you can tell it's a little lame now, but if we create a second oscillator and bring this up 7 semitones to the 5th, which is the dominant note of the scale, we suddenly have this nice chord. So let's try to make it sound a little more analog by using one of the other waveforms. Maybe we'll go with the mini saw. Yeah, it sounds a little better. We'll change the phase of one of them too. So then to beef it up, we can add a second voice. So it's basically duplicating the oscillator. It's a little too detuned and wide for my taste. We kind of want to focus the sound a bit. So let's bring those both down. I think that's sounding pretty good. So we can now work with the envelopes. Okay. Then we'll add a filter. Let's do the Mogi one. Bring the cutoff down low and the envelope depth up. Add some filter drive for some analog warmth. And let's see how that sounds. All right, now if we were to compare that to the Minotaur, yeah, so it's sounding pretty similar. So I say we get rid of the Minotaur. And now that we have the patch in a pretty good state, we can start doing a bit of processing. I'll usually mix as I go. Not completely, obviously, but I'll try to make it sound more than just decent. Like I want it to sound good so it's enjoyable to listen to while I'm making the track. So I do a bit of the mixing while I'm creating the sounds. It's just part of the sound design for me, to be honest. So I'm going to put some saturation on it. Soundtoys Decapitator is by far my favorite saturation plugin. I love this Beefy G preset. One thing you have to be careful of, though, is gain staging. So whatever the level of the signal coming in is the same level of the signal that you want coming out. And the reason for that is you don't want to trick yourself into thinking it sounds better just because it's louder. So if we're going to drive it this much, you can click automatic, that brings it down. Bring it down even more. So when you mute it, you don't want it to sound that much louder. And that's so you can actually accurately tell if it's doing something positive for the sound. So the saturation is just going to add extra harmonics. It's going to warm it up a little bit. Just give it a little bit of sizzle on the top. Yeah, so I think that's sounding good. So at this point, when I'm making a song and I've come up with that idea that I know is going to work for the entire song, it's going to be the hook, I'll spend another 10 or 15 minutes to continue experimenting on that sound to see if I can't either make it better or make it so drastically different that maybe it could be like the B section. So in the case of Ruby, I remember loading up Echo Boy, which is my favorite delay plugin also from Soundtoys, and finding this cool preset, Bisonet. I'm guessing it's modeled after some hardware. I remember playing it and thinking, wow, that's a great tone. Maybe I don't even use this as the delay, I just use it for the tone, because this plugin just has a bunch of different models of delay that really can alter the tone, especially when you move the saturation knob. So if I bring the time down to 0, bring the feedback down, and bring it all the way wet, and then widen it up a little bit, so it's like a completely different patch. And that's great because if I'm going to be playing the same melody for 5 minutes straight, pretty much the entire song, it'll definitely benefit from having a drastic change in the sound to keep it fresh. So let's just hear it a little bit. Yeah, so it's drastically different. Can definitely keep the sound fresh as we drag it on throughout the song. So maybe now we'll load up another instance and actually use the delay as a delay, not as just a tone tool. So let's load up that same sound. Maybe bring the saturation down a bit. We're going to want to sync it to MIDI. Maybe this time we'll do a ping pong delay. Widen it up. Yeah, so we don't have to use that the entire time, but we will definitely automate that mix throughout the song because it sounds great. It just adds a little bit of atmosphere and ambience. So I think we're at a good stopping point. Normally I would say, okay, I have a great melody. Have a couple options for the sound. I've done a tiny bit of mixing. Let's move on to the bass. And for songs like this, where it's like a pretty repetitive looping melody, I like to create these bass progressions where by changing the bass note each bar or throughout the song, you're actually creating these implied chord changes. So you're like creating a chord progression just by changing the bass note. And I find that looping the same melody over changing bass notes is actually more impactful and powerful than changing the arpeggio or the melody with the bass. Something about that is just really appealing to me, and a lot of other artists do it as well. I just think sometimes when you're starting out, you think you have to change the arpeggio to match the bass note, but it's actually more impactful, in my opinion, if you keep it the same and change the bass note. So in the next video, that's what we'll do. We'll start working on the bass.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting, and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content. And if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.